The Joint Committee will come to order. This is a joint subcommittee hearing on Commerce, Trade, and Consumer Protection and the Commerce, Technology, and Internet Subcommittee. The subject matter for this hearing is the title, Exploring the Offline and Online Collection and Use of Consumer Information. I am privileged to chair the Subcommittee on Commerce, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and my friend and colleague, Mr. Boucher, who is the chairman of the Communications, Technology, and Internet Subcommittee of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. It is my honor to chair the first part of this hearing, and this hearing will be chaired subsequently by Chairman Boucher. The chair recognizes himself now for 5 minutes for the privileges and the purposes of an opening statement. The collection and use of personal information of customers and consumers are threads from the same knitting needle sewn into the fabric of American commerce and competition near the start of the 20th century. Accordingly, these tools and methods predate their more powerful, precise, and predictive counterpart in the online realm by more than 100 years. But just because we have something that's been around for a long time does not mean we understand as much about it as we should. And that is why I am delighted about today's hearing. It is the fourth in a series of hearings our two subcommittees have held on the subject of privacy. At our hearings and in our meetings, consumers and their advocates, industry, and leading commentators have shared with us extensively why this all matters, how entrepreneurs and businesses go about protecting consumer privacy, and why collecting personal information about individual consumers improve the chances that businesses will have to succeed. While preparing for these hearings, we have been surprised at how little is really known about how businesses go about ensuring that individuals' privacy is protected. Consumers are telling us they want to know more about how their information is being protected. As their representatives and as consumers ourselves, we hear them loud and clear. They should be and are concerned, even to the point of anger when they learn that they've been placed on consumer lists identifying themselves as affluent Jews or blacks, as pro-choice or pro-life, as donors, as members of the same-sex couple relationship, or as being addicted to gambling, addicted to sex, or addicted to tobacco. Indeed, on my way back home to Chicago to celebrate the Thanksgiving holidays, I could take public transportation to the airport, and by using a smart card and a frequent flyer card, records of my whereabouts and when and to where I was commuting and flying are created. To buy my holiday turkey, I may use my grocery reward card, which will swipe into a system of databases which is in my cart. When and where I shop, how much I paid are among the other data points that would be collected. And these are just several examples of the type of consumer lists and data points that are generated and populated into databases 24 hours a day, 65 days of every year. But how much do we know about the businesses that make it all a business of obtaining and selling or sharing, quote, offline, end quote, information and customer lists with affiliated and unaffiliated businesses? How much do we know about their marketing practices and product development strategies to protect buyers and individuals who will pay considerable amounts of money for that information? How much do we really know about what these buyers and individuals do with that information, including reselling the information downstream to other buyers and bidders for that information? I'm interested in hearing everyone's perspective about the current legal and regulatory structure that exists to protect this information. Should the source of this information, whether it is taken offline from a warranty registration card or online from a social or health networking site, be treated differently when it reveals fundamentally the same personal information about individual consumers? And by treating the information differently with a heightened duty on business to protect, quote, online sources, end quote. For example, are we setting perverse incentives and conditions for regulating arbitrage and avoidance? Let it be clear. My end goal is to work with members of this subcommittee and members of this committee to introduce privacy legislation which protects consumers from privacy-related harms, yet doesn't stifle responsible entrepreneurs and business people from developing models and executing successful business and marketing plans that are indeed respectful of consumer privacy. Keeping privacy protections that belong in the back office from tumbling into the crawl spaces under the office will be a big part of our challenge. And whatever bill we draft, we must work to ensure that the accelerating convergence of offline and online collection and use does not outpace the demands of consumers for dignity and for discipline and for decency in our dawning digital economy and markets. I yield back the balance of my time, and I recognize the ranking member of this subcommittee, Mr. Radonovich, for 5 minutes for the purposes of opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman Rush, and I want to thank you for holding this second hearing on the topic of privacy. And we understand or have heard rumors of legislation coming in the next few weeks, and I look forward to that and working with you on legislation to improve rights of privacy. As I've stated before, I believe an individual's information is their own personal property. We as consumers should know what information is gathered about us, where and how it is stored and protected, and who has access to that stored information. And most importantly, for the context of this hearing, with whom and for what purposes is that information shared? But the fact of the matter is that information collection, aggregation, and sharing predates the Internet by decades, and yet most of us don't know the details of who has the information, what information they have about us, and where they obtained it. The most critical point of concern for me is not necessarily the aggregation of this data offline, but when that comparatively limited offline data is combined with more comprehensive data collected online. I believe that that is the most important development because it will continue to grow in significance as e-commerce and mobile commerce expand. The flip side of my concern for privacy and the right to control my information is the recognition that this information sharing is good for business, and I certainly do feel that or do not feel that I've been harmed because a retail catalog appeared on my mail. Maybe the 10th one in one day. Yes, I have been harmed. But however, we all know that collected information can, in certain contexts, be used by criminals that if that information is not respected and protected. In general, I believe the free market can and should be allowed to solve these types of issues. As consumers become aware and demand certain protections, practices, and control options, industry will respond in order to maintain those vital relationships. Thankfully, the best actors do take privacy privacy seriously, and they do provide options for consumers to block the sharing of their information for marketing purposes. The problem for Congress is similar to what we face on many issues, and that is how to address the bad actors without overburdening the good by depressing or even eliminating productive and beneficial commercial activity. That's the balance for which we should strive, and the approach that I'll continue to support. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today, particularly our small business representative. I'd like to know exactly what information you collect, with whom you share it, and how you and your partners use that information. I'd also like to hear all of your thoughts about how this can be addressed through industry self-regulation and what, if any, steps Congress may need to consider to ensure personal information and the use of that information are adequately protected and treated properly. Finally, I'd like to know your thoughts on how the varying approaches to potential regulation of sharing we've previously discussed in this committee, such as first-party, third-party approach, or a primary personal approach, would impact the world of small business. We've seen in other contexts the consequences of acting too quickly without full investigation of potential consequences. In this area that is so important to so many people, I want to make sure that any policy decisions are based upon the fullest information available and will be fair to all businesses regardless of their size and corporate structure. We all want to protect privacy and prevent harm, but Congress should not seek to solve the issue by choosing winners and losers. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thank you, witnesses, for your time and your input today, and yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Chair, thanks to the gentleman, the Vice Chair, or the Ranking Member, rather. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, for 5 minutes for the purposes of opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much, and thank you so much for holding this critically important hearing. Shakespeare, in Othello, said, "Who steals my purse steals trash. 'Tis something, nothing. 'Twas mine, 'tis his, and has been a slave to thousands. But he that filches from me my good name robs me of that which not enriches him, but makes me poor indeed." Now, as we were growing up, our doctors, our bankers, the nurses, they were privacy keepers. We knew that our medical record was locked up in that closet with the nurse with the key to open it up to go in and get the records. And it wasn't going to be shared with the neighborhood. The same thing is true for all of our records. But we have moved from an era now of privacy keepers to one of privacy peepers and data mining reapers who want to turn our information into products. And what is the product? The product is our records, our privacy, our family's history. And as online and wireless merge, it becomes all the more possible to take this world and to compromise the privacy of Americans. And so this really goes to the heart of who we are. We wouldn't let the government do this. We wouldn't let the government gather all this information and make it a product. So we have to protect against businesses that think that we're all products. Our families are all products. The members of our families are all products, because this information is invaluable as a product to other people. But to us, it goes right to the essence of our families and who we are and what privacy we should have a right to expect. And so as we're moving forward, we have to create the rules. The new technologies themselves have no personality at all. They're just technologies. They only get their personality as we animate them with the values that we want them to serve. And so, from my part, I think that the old values served us very well, and the new technology should be animated with those old values. That's the key to this discussion. It's not, oh, Congress can't keep up with new technology. Oh, we can keep up with it. We know what's going on. The question is, do we have the insight and the courage to add those old values so that families aren't compromised by businesses that want to make a product out of people's business? When we were doing the Health IT bill in February, adding that $20 billion, I authored the language that ensured that the information that was now going to be transmitted was indecipherable to unauthorized users. Because, yes, we want to get the benefit of new health IT information because that can help patients. But we don't want that information to now be compromised as it's taken out of the file and put online. We want the benefits to flow to the patients, but not for the information to be turned into a product, a profile, that can then have everyone in town or everyone across the country knowing who had anorexia, prostate cancer, breast cancer in your family. If you want to tell someone about it, you should be able to do it. But if you don't want to tell anyone about it, that should be your right too. And there's many people who don't mind people finding out, but there's many others who aren't going to tell anyone else in their family that they have a secret. That should be their right. It shouldn't be a decision made by a business that it's now just widely disseminated because there might be more products that they can help you with to gain access to. They should ask you if you want to have access to it. Then that information can be sent out there. So this brave new world is really no different than the discussion that our grandparents and our parents had to have about the privacy they expected. And I think that the same values exist. The technology should work for families, and they should have the right to say no. They should have the knowledge that information is being gathered about them. They should have the notice that the information is going to be used for other purposes other than that which was originally intended. And they should have the right to say no. No, I want the benefit of the technology, but I don't want it turned into a product. I don't want my children's, my mother and father's information now some kind of product that's out there. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. We could not have a more important subject. I yield back the balance of my time.
The Chair thanks the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Energy. Now the Chair is recognized as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Energy, Mr. Stearns, for 5 minutes for the purposes of opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me commend you also, you and Mr. Boucher, for having this hearing, and thank the witnesses for coming. We look forward to your testimony. We've had, I think back in June, we had a big discussion on behavioral advertising and how to broadly examine how companies are using consumer internet behavior to tailor online advertising to simply identify the ways this kind of targeted advertising affects the consumer. How does he or she benefit from this? And I think most of the feelings were that the consumer doesn't benefit from this. So, in a sense, this committee is here to hear more about the subject, but also with an understanding to do no harm. Only the consumer knows how he or she feels about the information being collected, the parties that are doing the collecting, and, of course, the purpose for which the information is being collected for. The question becomes, how much influence and how much regulation should Congress be involved with? I don't think Congress cannot and should not make the decision for the consumer. The consumer should make that decision for themselves. We, as members of this committee, certainly can play a proactive role in ensuring that consumers have this adequate information and full range of tools at their disposal in order to simply make this informed choice, whether it's opt-in or opt-out. Companies that collect information about consumers in both an offline and online manner obviously have to be good stewards of the information and should seek to protect that information where it's appropriate. Additionally, all companies, whether they be data brokers, major retail companies, or even small businesses, should operate in a transparent manner and fair manner when it comes to the information they collect about consumers or how that information is subsequently being used. The real transparency, I guess, is a question of how robust a disclosure and notice to the consumer is required in their privacy policy. They obviously should be presented in a clear, conspicuous manner so that the consumer knows, should be indicating what is being collected, the ways the information is being used, and third, the ways the consumer can prevent the collection of this information if they don't want to do it. This is a very significant challenge, and having had many hearings on privacy and understanding the Constitution issues, and as well as understanding the role of the Federal Trade Commission, when I was chairing the Commerce Consumer Trade and Protection Committee, I realized that people would have different outlooks on the opt-in and opt-out provision. I come to believe that for the most part, that if we get into too much of the weeds here, that we're going to impede the Internet and make it more difficult for people to collect information when it's probably not necessary. In fact, at one time, the Federal Trade Commission and I talked about a good housekeeping seal that would be provided by private companies that, in a sense, would be a seal of approval so that people, when they went on a website, would realize this already complies with a good housekeeping seal that has been approved by the Federal Trade Commission, so that they would have the confidence right there without going through the rigmarole of looking at an opt-in and opt-out provision and reading the detailed fine print in a privacy policy. The small businesses of this country create all the jobs, and there's a lot of Internet companies that are starting up, and obviously we wouldn't want to impede their ability to function. So this Internet is such a powerful means of communication. Putting in a significant privacy policy is very important and has the great effect of either helping, enhancing, or deterring, shall we say, the purchase of products, the use of it. So I think this is a very important hearing to hear from the people that are most involved. And I look forward to hearing from them and hearing some of the pitfalls of sort of what we have as a draft bill that Mr. Boucher and Mr. Rush and I and Mr. Others have put together. And so we're looking forward to perhaps after this hearing to get this draft bill out so that we can hear from you folks to see what you think of it, and then we can move forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
And the chair recognizes Mr. Green for 2 minutes for the purposes of the opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both you and Chairman Boucher, and thank you for holding this hearing to continue our examination of consumer data collection and use and the security and privacy implications it has. The issue and discussion of online versus offline data collection is an important one because the distinction has blurred so much over the past decade. The ability to easily aggregate and share information over the Internet has proved tremendous benefits to our society and our economy, and the collection of consumer information can provide tremendous benefits to small and upstart businesses by allowing them to target customers that have tendencies to purchase individualized products or services. One problem, however, is these aren't the only uses for this data, and the ability of entities that sell this information to collect such a wide variety of information on individuals is extremely troubling because it allows bad actors to target vulnerable individuals based on very specific and granular data that has been collected all across a line of online and offline platforms. Another problem is that this information creates a personal record that few, if any, consumers know what is exactly contained in it. Consumers have no ability to edit that profile like they would their credit report, but the records maintained on the databases are unregulated and often maintain more and wider ranging information than a credit report if the information is not used for products or services that fall under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Information about transactions, behaviors, and online, offline, and occur offline are also becoming more prevalent in these records that can be purchased from companies that sell this marketing information. Nearly every chain store has some sort of discount or club card to collect information of consumer trends. Records are kept and sold of individuals who enter various sweepstakes through the mail. Social networking sites provide possibility of the greatest threat because they contain day-to-day activity of tens of millions of frequent users. The aggregate of all this data can provide a tremendously detailed picture of a person's daily life, interests, habits, and behavior, which that person may never know exist. We have laws that regulate how this information can be used by financial institutions in relating to medical privacy, but outside of these defined areas, this information is largely unregulated and its potential will tremendously harm consumers. I want to thank the chair of both subcommittees for the hearing today and continue looking into this issue, and I look forward to our witnesses' testimony.
The chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. We have free over-the-air radio. We have free over-the-air TV. We have free email. We live in a great country, and one of the reasons why we have free email is the ability for people to put advertising banners on that. And I'm talking about Gmail and Hotmail. And we need to be very, very careful that this great benefit that millions of Americans take advantage of does not get hindered, disrupted, or destroyed by aggressive legislation in this area. And I yield back my time.
The chair thanks the gentleman for his brevity. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today. Trading and selling of personal information began as long ago as 1899. Two brothers created the Retail Credit Company to track the creditworthiness of Atlanta grocery and retail customers. Some people know that company now as Equifax. Since then, the cost of storing and manipulating information has fallen sharply, and now organizations capture increasing amounts of data about individual behavior. Consumers hunger for personalization, product services, websites that cater to them, that causes them to reveal information about themselves. Ordering off a catalog reveals other information. Using a credit card yields more. And thinking you have to send in that warranty card can reveal almost your entire life to other parties. But that information probably delivers better products, more targeted services, and a more enjoyable Internet experience. As Alejandro Acquisti of Carnegie Mellon writes, is there a combination of economic incentives and technological solutions to privacy issues that is acceptable for the individual and beneficial to society? In other words, is there a sweet spot that satisfies the interest of all parties? And then, what are the rules of the road that we need to put in place to make sure that consumers' privacy is protected and that commerce flourishes? That's what I hope to learn more about in today's hearing. I want to credit the work dozens of dedicated faculty and students working on consumers' data privacy at Carnegie Mellon University, located in the heart of my district, have done. CMU, the Data Privacy Lab, and SciLab have all greatly contributed to the academic literature, commercial consciousness, public awareness, and my understanding of this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The chair, thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Rush and Boucher. I want to thank you and ranking members Radanovich and Stearns for having this hearing on the collection and use of personal information. I'm pleased that both subcommittees are examining this issue. I know that Congress and this committee have held hearings on privacy in the past, but as we all know, consumers' personal information is being collected more and more every day, often without their knowledge, through both online and offline modes of commerce, whether they're participating in a survey, using Facebook, or even ordering a product over the phone. Given the importance of information in today's economy, and given how often consumers give out their personal information, there's a genuine cause for concern. Therefore, we must continue to examine ways to ensure consumers don't have their personal information compromised or misused. As one pointed out in our last joint hearing, many Internet companies are offering the ability to opt in or opt out of the company's policies to use or share personal information they collect. But those policies often do not address the collection of the data. The collection and use of personal information can help companies better serve customers, market products to certain consumers, and verify consumers' identity. But the potential for danger does exist. Personal information could easily be compromised, and there are bad actors that use consumers' personal information in ways that take advantage of the consumer, and in some cases in ways that are illegal. Consequently, there are issues that we must address. As we take those into consideration and debate the best steps moving forward, I hope we proceed carefully when drafting legislation in this area. As I stated at the previous hearing on behavioral advertising, I hope the focus of today's hearing is how we can protect consumers and their personal information, and what steps the industry will take on their own to do that. I hope today's hearing does not focus on ways government can get more involved in areas of people's lives where it does not belong. For this reason, I believe that if self-regulation is not sufficient, and if any privacy regulatory requirements are needed, they should be targeted, consistent, and not be greater for one business or industry than they are for another. Congress should not pick winners and losers. I look forward to hearing the comments of our panelists today, particularly on the collection of data through offline methods and how companies are using this data. I also hope to hear about current security measures that companies have in place and any they may be planning to implement in the future to ensure the protection of personal information. It's important that these committees understand their positions and activities, as well as all of the implications of collecting and using personal information. Thank you, and I yield back.
The chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you and Chairman Boucher for calling today's joint hearing, and I applaud your leadership in addressing this important issue. I'd like to also thank our panelists for being with us this afternoon. Today, we'll be examining the collection and commercial use of consumer information across the offline, online, and mobile marketplaces. Without their knowledge or approval, consumers' personal information is being collected when they conduct daily activities such as using the internet, shopping at the grocery store, or even order takeout from their local favorite restaurants. And that's just to name a few. In today's economy, information is everywhere, and it's to everyone. Unfortunately, it is essentially impossible to protect one's personal information these days. And it is understandable that most Americans simply do not trust that their personal information is properly protected. Privacy policies and disclosures should be clear and transparent so consumers can choose what information, if any, they want others to know, instead of inappropriate collection and misuse of that information. Consumers should also understand the scope of information that is being collected, what it is being used for, the length of time it is being retained, and its security. The more information that consumers have, the better. Moving forward, we must ensure that Americans feel secure that their personal information will not be misused the next time they surf the internet, shop at a grocery store, or eat carry-out from a restaurant. Meaningful privacy safeguards should be in place while making certain that we do not stifle innovation. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair thanks the gentlelady. The gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. We're glad you are here, and I am pleased that we're having this hearing today. Nearly everything that we do on the internet is monitored, and one of the things that we need to do is make certain that there is an understanding of what a level of privacy is and what those expectations are, and make certain that we put some good rules of the road in place. At the same time, we don't want to stifle the engines of internet commerce and e-commerce that have been an absolutely wonderful economic driver, especially for many small businesses. And in areas like mine, all the area from Memphis to Nashville, where we have so many small businesses that do depend on those e-commerce formats to make certain that they are profitable. Now, my constituents in Tennessee have raised with me the issue that there does seem to be an alarming trend in which ads from some well-known brands are consistently appearing on sites that traffic illegal content such as pirated movies and music. And these sites are often located outside the U.S. and may be linked to broader criminal enterprises that clearly have no regard for the privacy of others. They are very concerned about this, and they want to make certain that that is an issue that is addressed as we move forward in this debate. They're also concerned about rules as we look at privacy, something that about Congress getting in the business of dictating what data is acceptable or unacceptable and distorting how that travels up and down the pipe. So we need to be responsible, looking for responsible solutions that are going to both protect consumers and empower consumers to have control over their data and allow businesses to continue with their e-commerce format. So welcome. Look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blackburn. The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I waive my opening.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sarbanes, did you waive a statement? Okay. The gentleman will have time added to his question period. The gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. I commend Chairman Rush and Chairman Boucher for convening this fascinating and important hearing. As technology develops, the opportunity for abuse, I believe, is going to grow exponentially, and consequently, policy does need to keep pace to ensure that consumers are protected. A couple of things I'd like to learn this morning, this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to get an idea of the scope of the potential problems. How is this data going to be able to be used to affect our lives? And secondly, I'd like to understand what makes sense in terms of how data access and data use can and should be restricted. And I want to thank you all. You represent organizations that collect data and use data, so you're on the front lines. And with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Space, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Boucher. I'd like to thank Chairman Rush and Ranking Members Rudanovich and Stearns for convening our subcommittees today to discuss online and offline collection and use of consumer information. I was struck in reviewing our witnesses' testimony that there seems to be limitless sources for information on consumers, publicly available data, data volunteered by customers, and data collected from customer-facing businesses. Taken individually, each of these data sets provides a partial picture of a consumer. However, when these data sets are combined, retailers and data brokers can cobble together a fairly complete customer profile, and I find this fascinating. I certainly understand the benefits that such data sets can provide to businesses, especially small businesses, as highlighted by, and I hope I don't get this wrong, Ms. Bougie. With a name like Space, I can feel your pain. And to the extent that customer profiling can embrace or enhance commerce, I believe such data gathering is an important tool. However, as outlined by our witnesses, there are also some concerning possibilities about and regarding the abuse of this information. It seems like common sense that there should be some protections built in to shield mentally ill citizens, for example, from repeated unsolicited targeting marketing. The bottom line is that consumer data sets compiled from information gathered online and offline, and the handling of such data remain largely unregulated. This strikes me as being the Wild West of e-commerce, so that we have some critical interest to consider, and I welcome the continued discussion on this issue. I look forward to working on this matter with my colleagues, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Space. The gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Murphy, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the hearing to our chairman and our ranking members. Certainly, I think as we spend more time online, this issue of what data is being collected about each of us is increasingly critical. And I think we can all agree that most consumers would prefer to have a clear understanding of what information is being collected and how it's being used. But to some degree, I also believe that these consumers, if they think that the data collection is unobtrusive and inoffensive, and if it's being used, I think this point is important, if it's being used to give them information or opportunities that are relevant to them, that are catered to their interests, I think a lot of folks will take lesser offense to that type of data collection. Certainly, this is all predicated on a system that consumers can trust and verify. Beyond this, I'm interested today, and I hope the witnesses might elaborate on this, how the information that we're talking about today is being used to direct consumers to or advertise on sites that might engage in the pirating of legal content. As we know, there are a vast number of sites available to users whose business model is developed on providing pirated content to individuals, sometimes for a price and sometimes because they're supported by ad revenue for free. In combating piracy, it seems that we should look at how information derived from consumers is then being used to place advertisements or direct individuals to places where we know illegal activity is occurring. I hope to explore this issue in greater detail. I look forward to testimony and to listening to the questions. I thank the Chairman and yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrows, recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the Chair. I want to welcome all the witnesses today. I especially want to welcome Professor Chris Hufnagel, whom I remember many, many, many years ago when I had the privilege of representing him as a county commissioner. It was obvious to me he was going places then. I just wish I could stick around for the ride. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased our subcommittees meet today to discuss the issue of online and offline data collection and the commercial use of consumer information for the purpose of delivering targeted advertising. I have no doubt that sharing consumer information offers benefits to all of us. The benefits pretty much sell themselves. At least somebody can sell them. It's the costs that I'm worried about. As information brokerage continues to expand, it becomes more important than ever that we draw the line between enhanced data collection methods on the one hand and unwarranted breach of personal privacy on the other. In September, this committee was able to mark up H.R. 1319, the Informed Peer-to-Peer User Act, which I co-sponsored with Congresswoman Bono Mack. That bill tackles the privacy and security risks that come with peer-to-peer file sharing programs. I see the work that we're doing here today as a continuation of that effort to protect personal privacy without discouraging market and technological innovation. I want to thank Chairman Rush and Boucher for their leadership in addressing this issue. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrow. Members, having had an opportunity now to make opening statements, we turn to our panel of witnesses. And I would like to welcome each of you here this afternoon and thank you for taking the time to share your views on this subject of great interest to all of us here. Just a brief word of introduction about each of our witnesses. Mr. Chris, Hufnagel is the Director of Information Privacy Programs at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. Mr. George Papachin is the Chief Privacy Officer at Kantar WPP. Jennifer Barrett is the Global Privacy and Public Policy Executive at Axiom. Zoe Strickland is the Vice President and Chief Privacy Officer for Walmart Stores Incorporated. Michelle Buji is the Senior Internet Marketing Manager for LearningResources.com and EducationalInsights.com. Pat Dixon is the Executive Director of the World Privacy Forum. Without objection, each of your prepared written statements will be made a part of our record of proceedings today, and we would welcome your oral summaries. And in the interest of time, because we're not sure when we're going to have recorded votes that may command our presence on the floor for an extended period, we would ask that you try to keep your oral summaries to approximately 5 minutes. So, Professor Hufnagel, with that admonition, we'll be happy to begin with you.
Thank you. Chairman Boucher.
Pull that microphone fairly close and be sure to turn it on.
Thank you. Chairman Boucher and Ranking Members Radonovich and Stearns and honorable members of the committee, thank you for holding this hearing today on an often overlooked issue in consumer protection. While we have debated online privacy issues for the past decade, little attention has been focused upon how businesses collect, use, and disseminate information collected in offline contexts. For instance, at stores at the point of sale, through surveys, sweepstakes, catalog sales, and the like. I first approached this issue from a civil liberties perspective. About 6 years ago, I started highlighting the relationships between offline marketing companies and the government. As Mr. Markey noted in his opening statement, he said that Americans would never allow the government to collect so much information about them. However, I found that many government agencies had simply outsourced their information collection activities on citizens by hiring marketing companies. Offline marketing companies had data on almost every American adult, and they had created techniques to analyze the data that could be adopted to law enforcement and intelligence needs. More recently, my work has focused upon consumer protection in the offline marketplace. For some time, I tried to call attention to the sale of personal information about consumers among companies. I would find data cards, which are offers to sell personal information databases, and put them online. These lists included databases that described consumers in pejorative ways, and I would key up my first exhibit. This is a list of so-called impulsive consumers. It's difficult to read on the screen, but it is included as Appendix 2 in my testimony. The data marketplace has greatly outpaced legislative and regulatory interventions to protect consumer privacy. For instance, in California, legislators acted quickly to block phone companies from creating a wireless 411 database. This would be a service to look up cell phone numbers. However, in focusing upon phone companies, California legislators missed the mark. Several data companies with no consumer relationship whatsoever now market cell phone databases and other databases that list unlisted and private phone numbers. Appendix 2 of my testimony gives an example of one that's collected through the phone numbers that are given when you order pizza. And this is my second exhibit. This is an information service that claims to get unlisted and cellular telephone numbers by collecting them from pizza delivery companies. This brings me to a central point of my testimony today. American privacy law allows most offline businesses to sell customer data without giving the consumer notice or an opportunity to object. My public opinion research at UC Berkeley has focused upon whether consumers understand this. The findings are clear. Americans falsely believe that they enjoy a right of confidentiality with most businesses. This explains why they do not ask for privacy policies at the register or opt out to information collection. They incorrectly assume that privacy law prohibits the use of their personal information. Americans don't understand that the burden is upon them to object. The lack of a legal framework that governs information collection and use offline leads to practices that Americans would object to if they knew about them. I detail two in my written testimony. First, data companies use confidentiality agreements to keep information sharing secret. This means that if an advertiser wants to buy personal information about a group of people, the seller of the data binds the advertiser to confidentiality. Database companies prohibit their clients from telling customers how data were acquired, what data were acquired, and what categories the consumer has been placed in. This means that if you go to a business and ask, "How did you get my information?" the advertiser is contractually required to say, "We cannot tell you." This is part of a larger strategy that leaves consumers in the dark about information selling practices. Second, in the offline context and increasingly in the online world, companies are using enhancement. This is the practice of buying additional data about existing consumers. So for instance, have you ever been at a store and the cashier ask you what your phone number is? If you share your phone number, that gives that retailer the ability to reverse look up your name and home address. Some of these problems could be solved with what I call data provenance, the ability to determine from where data was collected and the rules and context governing its collection. Since I have just 10 seconds left, I'd like to thank the committee again for holding this hearing, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hufnagel. Mr. Papachin.
Chairman Boucher, Chairman Rush, Ranking Members Stearns and Radonovich, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to discuss an issue that is of critical importance to the businesses that I represent. My name is George Papachin, and I'm the Chief Privacy Officer of Kantar, a division of WPP. As I've been doing in external venues and industry forums on issues of privacy and public policy, I'm delighted to represent the interests of both Kantar and WPP here today. Utilizing information to become as relevant as possible to consumers and to transform the marketplace of products and services to be responsive to consumer needs, attitudes, and behaviors is at the heart of our business model. As you can appreciate, catering to consumer preferences on a continuous basis is simply not possible without the ability to collect or have access to reliable data and actionable insights. The dialogue taking place today is important, not only for the purpose of awareness and understanding of industry practices, but also to grant perspective on our shared respect for consumers. Getting it right with regard to our interaction with consumers is an essential element of business success for us. Our brands and the client brands that we represent have spent decades building trust with consumers and within the marketplace. Our involvement today is really a continuation of that capital investment. Kantar is one of the world's largest information consultancy networks, covering 80 countries and across the whole spectrum of research and consultancy disciplines. We offer clients insights at each and every point of the consumer or customer cycle. Our services are employed by a majority of Fortune 500 companies, domestic and foreign governmental entities at all levels, and almost every kind of brand that seeks to communicate to or have a relationship with consumers. We conduct market research, media measurement, which essentially means, for example, measuring how many people watch TV versus watch mobile TV versus watch TV online. And we house consulting and specialty services that run the spectrum from brand value to retail to healthcare to government service management. WPP is the world's leading communication services group. Through its operating companies, the group provides a comprehensive range of advertising and marketing services. Kantar is a research and consultancy arm of WPP and houses renowned brands such as Milner Brown, TNS, Added Value, and Dynamic Logic. Other segments of WPP are creative agencies such as Ogilvy and JWT, who create advertising. Media agencies are other segments like Group M, which buy and sell advertising. And our public relations and public affairs firms, many of whom have a strong presence right here in D.C. Helping clients manage communications has certainly become more challenging in the recent past due to audiences being more fragmented across the range of media platforms and devices. And challenging also because of media convergence, the idea that although people are using different devices to access content or to communicate, these platforms can be interlinked or overlap because of unifying digital language. Simply put, whereas consumers were confined to a limited number of channels broadcast over a handful of distinct platforms such as TV, new media has allowed a proliferation of channel choices. Staying ahead of these market shifts so that we continue to deliver best-in-class services to our clients who trust us with their investment in advertising and marketing is a matter of high priority for us. Consistent with that is our commitment to provide consumers with brand experiences that are relevant and responsible. As noted earlier, Kantar provides market research services, and they use a variety of methods to accomplish this objective. Market research is the voice of the consumer, the user, the citizen, or the donor. As you can surmise, market research fuels a variety of commercial and governmental services. Researchers use various methods of data collection. Certainly, there are parts of the world where data collection is primarily done offline, via telephone interviews, mall intercept surveys, paper diaries, etc. However, in the U.S. in particular, much of research is now conducted online. Online panels, sometimes dedicated to single sectors such as healthcare, web intercept surveys where consumers are invited in real time, online, to give opinions. Online communities and various other methods are routinely employed. Some methods utilize cookies or tracking technologies to discern ad exposure, understand site visitation, and other metrics. Passive tracking technology has positively impacted market research in that it allows shorter surveys and for respondents to not have to observe total recall on all media matters. It's often said that interactive platforms permit greater customization for the user and better measurement for the content or service provider. I would agree with that from an aspirational and inherent capability perspective. While the promise of customization and improved measurement is real and progress is encouraging, I believe the medium is still maturing and still only on its way to fulfill on potential. Earlier this year, the Federal Trade Commission released its staff report on online behavioral advertising, and this summer, a coalition of industry trade associations, which included the Interactive Advertising Bureau, 4A's and several others, and various businesses, they put forward a self-regulatory framework to address the issues raised by congressional and regulatory concerns. Our companies, like 24/7 Real Media and Group M, have taken an active role in the coalition work, but we haven't stopped there. We took up the challenge to produce market models to work out the implementation needs of the proposed self-regulatory scheme. We established a cross-WPP leadership team to develop and test tools, actual tools, which provide enhanced notice and greater transparency about online tracking. We have sought to collaborate with technology firms and others who would introduce real solutions for implementing the full elements of the self-regulatory framework. While behavioral advertising is one way to build a more customized user experience, there are still many other innovations the web enables in this area. Some of them employ designs that don't necessarily require tracking behavior or activity across multiple sites, whereas others do. It's really the vibrancy of the Internet that allows the variety of the models that we see today. It's terrific.
Mr. Papagen, if you could wrap up, you're well over a minute beyond your time now.
Traditional and relevant standards such as personally identifiable information and sensitive data classifications have certainly helped chart the regulatory framework of the online medium, and I think it has a role to play going forward. I am of the firm belief that proactive privacy is possible in all areas I've discussed, and that it can be accomplished within a self-regulatory framework. Building trust with consumers is a primary tenet of any successful business, and we are committed to contributing to a successful formula. I'm encouraged by the steps that members of Congress, and particularly those in these two subcommittees, have taken to explore the topic of consumer data collection and use. I thank the subcommittee for allowing me this time to put forth our position, and I look forward to staying engaged and active in the ongoing conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Papagen. We have two recorded votes pending on the floor of the House. We are going to hear from Ms. Barrett, and then the subcommittee will briefly recess while we respond to those votes. We'll pick up when they're concluded. Ms. Barrett.
Thank you, Chairman Boucher. Ranking Member Radonovich.
And could you pull the microphone very close, please? Thank you.
Members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to share Axiom's perspective. First, let me say we are in strong support of appropriate use of consumer information. Protecting privacy has been a priority for us for decades. Use of consumer information to defraud, discriminate, embarrass, or harass consumers is inappropriate and should be illegal, as it already is in many situations. However, consumer data makes a significant contribution to our nation's economy, growth, and stability. For 40 years, Axiom has been a market leader in responsibly providing innovative marketing services and data solutions to help our clients deliver better products and services smarter, faster, and with less risk. Marketing services are 70% of our revenues, and data solutions are the remaining 30%. Our marketing services are specialized computer services that help businesses, nonprofits, and political organizations manage and use their customer information. Although e-commerce has greatly increased the availability of products for consumers, it has also introduced new risks that make a trusted relationship more important and more difficult. We help clients accurately identify a particular individual and integrate their information across multiple lines of business and varied points of contact. Our email and mobile message delivery services help our clients respect consumer preferences while complying with various laws like canned spam. Our data solutions, on the other hand, provide marketing intelligence and support for identity and risk management decisions. We deliver actionable information not readily available to our clients that help fill an important gap between knowing what their customers bought and knowing what they like, how they spend their time, and how they feel about certain issues. Untargeted interactive communications are the junk mail of the digital age. Yet this advertising has funded much of what consumers enjoy most about this interactive experience. Consequently, the real winner in the appropriate use of consumer information is the consumer. In the offline world, Axiom operates in a fully personally identifiable realm. But in the online world, until the consumer chooses to identify themselves to a website or an interactive device, in Axiom Solutions, the consumer remains anonymous. We obtain the data we bring to market from several hundred carefully chosen sources. It falls into three general categories: public records and publicly available data, provide names, contact information, and some demographic information that come from public directories and other state and local registries. Responses to surveys and questionnaires provide additional demographic, lifestyle, and interest data. Finally, Axiom acquires some data directly from consumer-facing organizations. For marketing purposes, consumers are given notice and choice about their data being shared with parties like Axiom. We use only very general summary data that would indicate certain lifestyles or interests. For our identity and risk solutions, the focus is on identifying data, which in some instances actually comes from heavily regulated industries. It's important to note that Axiom does not collect online browsing or search activities on consumers. We have a culture of respecting consumer privacy. Our own guidelines are more restrictive than laws or industry standards. We offer an opt-out from any or all of our marketing solutions and access and correction in our identity and risk solutions. Before I close, I want to clear up two common misconceptions. First, Axiom does not have one big database that contains detailed information about everybody. Instead, we have many databases designed to meet very specific needs of our clients. Second, no marketing information we provide to clients can be used for decisions of credit, insurance underwriting, or employment. The environment in which data is collected and our clients communicate with their customers has changed a lot in our 40 years. Online is no longer separate and distinct from the offline, mobile, or interactive TV world. Also, privacy is a very contextual issue and varies by application, while different individuals feel very differently about it. The committee's greatest challenge is to identify what practices should be regulated by laws versus what should be covered by interim self-regulation or best practice. Complicating your task is anticipating what changes technology might alter, either in the benefits or the risks. Similar analysis is taking place across the world, but at present no one can claim to have developed a truly workable approach. While the committee considers additional regulation, we should be clear about the extent of harm or market failure it believes has occurred and look for the least restrictive alternative. Informational hearings help inform all parties where policymakers' concerns lie and where industry needs more proactive initiatives. However, if privacy laws overreach, everyone suffers, including our economy. Mr. Chairman, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today and are available to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barrett. We're going to stand in recess for what will approximately be a half hour. It may be a bit shorter than that, depending on how quickly the vote goes. So stay close. Don't venture far. And as soon as we return, we'll pick up our hearing.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Rush. And thank you for inviting Walmart to participate in today's hearing on online and offline privacy. My name is Zoe Strickland, and I am Walmart's Chief Privacy Officer. For us, good privacy is good business. As the largest retailer and private employer in the U.S., with approximately 140 million customers shopping in our U.S. stores every week, Walmart considers an array of privacy issues on a daily basis. Unlike companies that interact with customers or other businesses primarily online, Walmart approaches privacy from a very broad perspective. Walmart operations cover almost every conceivable privacy topic, channel, and geographical region. Given the depth and breadth of Walmart's understanding of consumer privacy issues, we appreciate the committee including Walmart in today's discussion and would encourage you to engage other similarly situated companies. It is imperative that as privacy rules are developed, legislators take the time to fully understand the impact to consumers that have both online and offline relationships with companies. Walmart supports a principle-based approach to privacy rather than a focus on one particular technology or activity. As an example of a principle-based approach, this summer we updated our customer privacy policy for Walmart operations. The updated policy is based on the Fair Information Practice Principles as well as industry standards and global guidelines. Our goal was to make it transparent, meet best practices, and to be integrated across all business units. To further increase transparency, we included a summary notice that links through to the detailed policy. The new privacy policy provides customers more control over their data. Some examples are creating a preference center that allows customers to tell us directly their preferences regarding direct marketing and data sharing for marketing purposes, establishing a stricter standard for data uses customers typically consider more sensitive. Walmart uses opt-in for telemarketing and data sharing, providing additional or enhanced opt-out mechanisms such as for email ratings and online behavioral advertising, giving customers greater access to their own information, and finally providing more options to submit questions and concerns. This initiative gave us further insights into how to focus on underlying privacy principles and then to operationalize them. With regard to online behavioral advertising, Walmart provides clear notices and opt-outs consistent with the FTC self-regulatory principles as well as industry best practices. Equally important in our view, we integrated our approach into our larger view of privacy in both the online and offline worlds. When and how is it appropriate to give notice? When and how should consumer choice be offered? We do believe notice and choice are still central privacy protections, even if further protections are warranted. We think our experiences with the use of electronic product code technology, EPC, is a useful example that demonstrates how a broader principle-based approach is appropriate and needed. At the simplest level, EPC is the next generation barcode. Currently, EPC is primarily used to track certain case and pallets in the supply chain. When EPC may be offered on individual products on the sales floor, future potential customer benefits are real and direct. Examples include receiptless returns, product authenticity, traceability, and food and product safety. Even though EPC tags in retail contain no personal data, we are building in privacy protections. As a cornerstone of EPC development, Walmart is designing its use to enable choice. EPC tags will be easily removable from the product or its packaging, such as by placing it on the price tag. If EPC tags used by the retail industry are ever embedded, we will offer a mechanism to disable the tag. We believe that choice is absolutely the right model for this technology. Some, perhaps most, consumers will appreciate its benefits. Some will not. But ultimately, consumers should be able to choose which they prefer. A challenge, of course, is how to provide appropriate notice. This covers both how consumers know this technology is in operation and also know what this technology actually means. A variety of methods and channels are possible, including notices on products themselves, notices on or in facilities, and website information. You can see how a debate that focuses solely on notices provided on websites, like pop-ups, would miss the boat for this technology. In conclusion, Walmart interacts with consumers frequently and in every conceivable way. A uniform, or at least consistent, privacy framework that includes standards such as consumer choice is effective for both consumers and businesses. A privacy regime based on a set of core principles will be sufficiently flexible to be applied in multiple contexts. Consumers deserve to know what to expect with regard to how their information is being collected and used, where they may obtain further details that they desire, and how they can make appropriate choices regarding the use of their data or technology. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. We look forward to continuing to work with you, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Strickland. Ms. Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittees. My name is Michelle Bougie, and I am the Senior Internet Marketing Manager of Learning Resources Incorporated of Vernon Hills, Illinois, a small business manufacturer and distributor of classroom materials and educational toys. We sell both business-to-business and business-to-consumer, maintaining an extensive website and e-commerce store, as well as undertaking an active direct mail program for schools, teachers, and consumers. In our business, the protection of consumer information is paramount. We have long maintained a detailed privacy policy, which is posted prominently on our website. Our commitment to the protection of consumer privacy is voluntary, but is also required in the marketplace. Self-regulation by industry and market standards works effectively, and I urge you to be cautious in regulating the use of consumer data to avoid unintended consequences that might put small businesses at a permanent market disadvantage by preventing us from using technology to grow and expand. In the last 12 years, I have worked with literally dozens of companies in various capacities relating to the use of consumer data. In my experience, industry voluntary privacy standards have been universally adopted and are a regular element of any commercial transaction online or offline. Privacy is a routine and fundamental part of good business practices involving the sharing and use of consumer data today. Industry voluntary privacy standards were developed to meet consumer expectations and to match best practices from traditional direct mail. Companies who do not participate in self-regulatory practices such as protecting consumers' financial information or fail to follow opt-out instructions are blacklisted by consumers. As we all come to understand, the consumer is now more powerful online. Consumers use the power of social media to warn others about websites that offend or use bad practices. Consumers will likewise use the same tools to promote businesses that use best practices. It is important to recognize the collection and use of consumer data is essential to improving the consumer experience online. Cookies and other tracking means were developed to make it possible to make targeted product and service offers that match consumer needs. This sophisticated information gathering process has created a $300 billion industry and 1.2 million jobs. We must be careful not to endanger this major source of jobs and enhance consumer choice. Consumers can control the collection of consumer data in many important ways. Many companies like ours offer the right to opt out for consumers and choose to not participate in our marketing activities. Opt-out options are far superior to opt-in options, both from the standpoint of businesses and consumers. Businesses prefer opt-outs because they believe that few consumers will ever opt in, as fear alone discourages most people from opting in. Consumers have already experienced an online world filled with opt-ins. In the early days of the Internet, featured cautious approaches by websites with many opt-in choices. Consumers were prompted to accept website terms before entering, a practice that turned off many consumers at the early online experience, moved at a glacial pace, slowing the online purchase process for customers and lowering revenues for businesses. Consumers have ways to control the collection of data. Internet browser software can notify consumers of cookies, ActiveX controls, or other means of data collection. In order to maximize the speed and pleasure of their online experiences, many consumers turn off these warnings. Again, consumers and businesses are making these privacy options and choices without the need for federal regulation. We believe that regulation of consumer data may sharply curtail our ability to grow both online and offline. Small businesses don't generate enough leads to keep customer lists fresh and growing. We must have access to market data to find new customers. Likewise, consumers need us to promote our products and services because without this marketing, small businesses are just too hard to find. In our ability to collect and use this data is curtailed, we are vulnerable to large businesses gaining an effective monopoly on consumer identities and preferences. Large businesses with high web traffic or many storefronts have the means to generate and use consumer data for prospecting to remain dominant. Small businesses will lose this game every time. I urge you to be cautious and to carefully avoid unintended consequences. The Internet is a huge job creator and one of the great drivers of today's complex and rapidly evolving economy. A one-size-fits-all solution is very dangerous in an economy of this complexity. We believe the new legislation should take a crawl, walk, run approach, focusing on the most sensitive data, such as financial information or healthcare data, and relying on opt-out mandates for routine commerce. By taking such a prudent approach, Congress can ensure that small businesses do not find themselves in a permanent federal mandated market disadvantage. Thank you for considering my views on this subject. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bougie.
Thank you.
Ms. Dixon.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the chairman for inviting me here today. I'm Pam Dixon. I'm executive director of the World Privacy Forum. We're a nonprofit public interest research group based in California. We focus on in-depth research of privacy issues. The online and offline collection of information from consumers matters because it impacts our lives whether we know it or not. In the past, consumers have been told, you better watch out because you've got to act a certain way because something might go in your permanent record. We heard this in school when we were young. But today, because of large commercial databases and those activities related to those commercial databases, we have a new kind of permanent record. I call this the modern permanent record. This is a permanent record compiled from rich online and offline resources, and it can be used to deny or offer benefits, services, and goods and information to consumers. What I'd like to do is talk about how these commercial databases can be used to create a very detailed picture of a consumer and what that picture can do to a consumer's life. And to do that, I'd like to walk you through how the modern permanent record is created and used. So first, one source for the modern permanent record is marketing lists and databases. These are typically sourced from highly identifiable data. We're not talking about pseudonymous data residing on a hard drive somewhere. We're really talking about data where someone knows your name. If you can look at the monitor, you'll see a list of 20 million consumers. This is an ailments list, and it's a data card that's being sold on consumers. It lists detailed demographic information, and it also lists the various diseases that they have. This list is an unregulated list. It's outside of HIPAA because these people gave their information up in some way or another, sometimes with more knowledge than another. In the next list, you'll see it's a list of mental health sufferers. This is a list of 3 million consumers who landed on a telemarketing list or a list like this, and it talks about 2 million people with anger, antisocial diseases, ADD, HDD, autism, bipolar, and so forth. And the company says these people, marketing to them they're extremely receptive to any campaign because they suffer from various mental problems. And the real impact of these kinds of lists that are so unregulated is being seen already today. It's not theoretical. So, for example, one 91-year-old elderly vet was profiled in the New York Times. He landed on one such list, and what happened is he filled out a sweepstakes form, and he landed on a telemarketing list. It was sold, and as a result of bad actors purchasing the list, he was built of his life savings. And this gentleman, once he was on the list, he had no effective rights to remove himself from the list or mitigate those issues. Another way that the modern permanent record is created is through what I call non-Fair Credit Reporting Act databases or non-credit databases. These are databases that have rich scores of information in them. However, they may, even if they have identical information to what could be contained in a database subject to the FCRA, they are not subject to the FCRA because they're used for different purposes. An example of this is the Bad Customers database, and we have a screenshot of that website. That website says, are your purchasing transactions being denied? Find out if you've been blacklisted before it's too late. This database has 6 million consumers on it right now, and it's only been in existence for about a month. And the way consumers land on this database is that they dispute charges to their credit account. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because identity theft victims must dispute charges on their credit cards to move forward with their lives. So these are the kinds of databases where, yes, you disputed a charge, but what does that actually mean? Was it because you were a victim of fraud or because you were a bad actor? This is a very difficult thing. The third way that the modern permanent record is compiled and created is through a newer type of database, behavioral and transactional databases. These are the databases that put the 3D into the consumer. They provide the real detailed picture of the consumer and put flesh on the bones of the consumer. An example of this is eye gaze tracking cameras in retail stores. These cameras are not visible to consumers. And what they do is they track basically the number of consumers that have walked by certain points in the store. They also identify what a consumer is looking at and for how long. But what's happened, at least in the past year, is that this type of technology has been also combined with facial recognition technology. So what happens is that the consumer walking down the store who's being captured by the eye gaze tracking camera is also recognized and then marketed to. Now, that's a practice that's in use today. Everything that I've told you is in use today. And it's not theoretical. So the question this committee has to face is it worth the risk involved to consumers when you have these large aggregated pictures of consumers that can define their lives? Is it worth that risk to leave them unregulated? And I would argue that the modern permanent record, unless there are substantive rules of the road that govern how the modern permanent record is used, that we're really creating a situation where there's going to be car accidents and pileups. As consumers become more aware of the threat of how a modern permanent record can potentially be used in their lives, I think we really enter a situation where it can chill commerce and really chill people's lives and inhibit them. A good example of this can be found through Cox Communications. They offer a digital telephone service. That digital telephone service is then subject to detailed analysis, and what it does is it analyzes the numbers of the phone numbers that you call and who calls you. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but what if you have a family member who's a deadbeat? What if you have a friend who's a deadbeat? What inference is drawn on you based on those phone calls? So what does that do to your permanent record, your modern permanent record? And that's really the question that we need to look at and we need to answer in terms of policy creation. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to any of your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Dixon, and committee's thanks to all of our witnesses for your informative testimony today. I'm going to ask a brief question, and I would appreciate a brief answer, and I'll ask each of you just to respond to this in perhaps 15 seconds or less. Assuming that we adopt a set of new privacy protections, should we apply those both with regard to online and offline transactions? Ms. Dixon.
Yes, I believe you should, because the offline collection of data is highly identifiable and can include biometric information, name, health information, and other information that is entirely unregulated.
Thank you. Ms. Buji?
I would say it can't be a one-size-fits-all. Online information is different in many cases than offline, and so I would recommend that we just be very cautious, because in the case of a small business, it would really restrict our ability ultimately to prospect with web searches and things like that.
So you're not saying apply it online only. You're just saying be careful about how you apply it to both.
Be very careful, because it could, again, the unintended consequences of what would happen.
All right, thank you. Ms. Strickland.
Yes, Walmart does favor a principle-based approach that doesn't focus on one particular technology, and I think it's very hard to draw a line that clearly separates online from offline. A lot of services now are both online and offline, so I think a broader view is needed.
Okay. Ms. Barrett?
Yes, Chairman. I think the
Microphone, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we think it should be not limited to online, but a broader perspective. But I would echo my colleagues' remarks about some of the nuances regarding what's practical to do in an online world and what's not practical or might be need to be dealt with differently in an offline world.
All right, thank you.
I would agree with the tenor of the comments so far, that convergence, as we've seen, would dictate that we have a more broader application. The nuances of the application should be carefully observed, but a broader application is correct.
Okay. Mr. Hufnagel?
I think the answer is it depends. Offline data collection is a little different. And
Microphone closer, please.
My answer would be it depends. It depends on the substantive protections built into the bill and whether they are appropriate in the offline context.
All right, Mr. Hufnagel, let me pose my second question to you. You have performed, and we're aware of your study, that, as I understand it, finds that 2/3 of the American public does not favor the receipt by them of tailored advertising. And given the benefits of tailored advertising that many on our panel have stressed here today, what do you think we might be able to do that could change that number and persuade more people that not only is it not harmful, but perhaps even beneficial to the receipt of that advertising to receive it?
That's a great question, Mr. Chairman.
And pull the microphone closer, please.
We were surprised by the answer that so many Americans said that they principally reject tailored advertising, and troubled by that result, because it's clear that tailored advertising does have advantages for consumers and for businesses. But we think also that consumers might have a lot of anxiety around information collection. They might not want information collection in one context to follow them into another. So, for instance, the targeted ads that you get at home when you're using the internet for personal purposes, consumers might not want that to bleed over to how they use the computer in the workspace. I think that if there is greater transparency and rules around data collection, it might change that number and more people might.
So let me just cite an example. Let's suppose that we adopt a law that says that any entity that collects information from a customer, whether that collection be online or offline, provide to the customer a thorough description of what information is collected, a thorough description of how that information is used, and then provide an ability through a series of opt-in and opt-out arrangements, depending on what the information is and how it's used, for that customer to be able to control the use or perhaps control the collection of the information itself. If we provide that set of consumer guarantees, what do you think that might do to persuade more people that having information collected for the purpose of tailored advertising is perhaps advantageous to them, or at a minimum, have them be willing to acquiesce in it?
That is an interesting approach. I would point out that our survey shows that people already assume that there are opt-in standards in place. Americans assume that they have a right of confidentiality in the marketplace.
So they're making that assumption even when 2/3 of them say they don't want the tailored advertising.
That's right. And
if they knew the truth, that they really didn't have even the measure of control they think they do, that 2/3 number might even be higher, is what you're saying.
I think that consumers have a lot of anxiety in this area, and that might be one of the reasons why they're expressing that level of objection. My collaborator and I, Joseph Turo of the University of Pennsylvania, argued that notice and opt-out might not be the most optimal approach because consumers do not read privacy notices. They already assume that protections are in place. Opt-out, too, can be problematic. We argued that policymakers...
You mean opt-in, too, can be problematic?
No, opt-in can be manipulated as well. And, in fact, we explicitly said that the right answer is not just to go to opt-in. We discussed the idea of there being mandatory retention ceilings, so that information would have to be deleted after a certain amount of time.
After a certain period of time.
And that would allow targeted advertising, but it wouldn't allow kind of a permanent profile.
Let's suppose, just for the sake of this question, that we do those things, and that we have retention limits, full disclosure, a set of opt-in and opt-out opportunities to control what happens. Do you think that instills a greater amount of confidence in the American public that the online experience is secure, and to the extent that they're engaging in offline transactions, that they have more control over their privacy?
I think it would. And it would
Do you think it might enhance commerce if we did such a thing?
Yes, sir. I think.
All right. My time's expired. Thank you for your answers. Those are very helpful. Mr. Vrdanovich.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher, and appreciate the panel of witnesses. Earlier in my opening testimony, I talked about, there was one point that, people, about the delivery of a catalog to your doorstep, and I expounded on a little bit extemporaneously, because I remember in the past where the holidays would come around or an event would happen in my family, and all of a sudden, you don't have one magazine or a catalog, you've got 10 or 15. Incredibly frustrating. And what was more frustrating was the hassle it was to get these people to shut it down if that's because I didn't want them, and it just didn't. And I know that my following question will not speak to the issue of the collecting of private data, but it does speak to the issue of a person's ability to control what happens in their home. And so I want to ask each member of the panel, I don't want to interrupt free commerce and trade, and as long as the boundaries are proper, I think it's good. But I am all for, in a number of ways, making sure that a family's home, to be politically correct, is its castle, and that the people in their homes have as much ability to control what drops on their doorstep, what pops up on their video, their computer screen and such. Is there anybody that can explain to me ways that the industry could look to provide people with really a lot of ease in their households to be able to shut this stuff down if they want to? I mean, I got to think if I was the father of a new child, I may or may not appreciate the fact that I got 100 catalogs in there on how to buy a baby crib and want to shut it down. But if I shut it down, I might think, oh gosh, maybe I do want that information. I'd like to see that control in the home. Has anybody given any thought to how you can shut that down, or ways to make it easier to do that? And I'll just open it up to the panel. Ms. Barrett, if you.
Yes, I would point to the new self-regulatory guidelines that the Direct Marketing Association put into place last year, where you can go to their website and you can opt out from all marketing communications, or you can pick certain companies that you can, even if you have a customer relationship with that company, and say, I don't want to receive marketing communications from you. I think this is a big step in the right direction, and one that's probably not as well known as it ought to be.
And it's not as well known as it ought to be, if I heard that right? Correct? Yes. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you very much. The self-regulatory approach has merit. The problem is that it's just the good companies that are following the rules that typically join the self-regulatory efforts, and they're always the ones who you call and they stop sending the catalogs. It's the bad actors, and that's why I think that a broader approach could be very useful in really curtailing.
More regulatory approaches.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things to look at is looking at some data rights that are not identical to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, because it would be extraordinarily complex to do, but looking at that and saying, what can we learn from that statute and apply to this area? Is there a way that consumers could have a regular, standardized way of finding out what lists they're on and seeing that information, making sure it's accurate, seeing that it's not retained for the duration of their lives, and so on and so forth? I think that approach would require a lot of discussion and very serious thought, but has merit.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Boogie, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. In your testimony, you mentioned the one-size-fits-all approach to this whole thing. Do you have any suggestions on what appropriate regulation might be then, if it's not one-size-fits-all?
Well, our concern for the one-size-fits-all approach is that business concerns of a small business are
There you go.
Our concern with the one-size-fits-all approach is that business concerns of a small business are vastly different from those of a large corporation. So this narrow view would restrict us with very few options. The online options help because it helps level the playing field. And if regulations restrict online behavior as an advertising option, or the ability to prospect or gain email addresses, we'll be left, basically our list will slowly go away.
Right.
But I believe by allowing voluntary privacy standards with marketing data to continue, and we focus on the regulations of financial and medical, that it's going to be more advantageous for small business and allow technology to foster as it should.
Okay. Ms. Strickland.
Thank you very much. I also would like to echo her remarks about the one-size-fits-all, and I think that's true not just for small companies and large companies, but this debate we're having about online and offline as well. So as we think about what appropriate notice is, that will be different on a website than, as you might imagine, in a store. You're not going to have the ability to have the depth and level of information in a store notice necessarily. So as we think about how do we do a principle-based approach, how do we make it flexible enough that it will work in a variety of contexts, a variety of technologies, and a variety of companies?
All right, thank you.
I would just add that two things. One, I think consumer expectation with regard to medium should play a role when you are looking at the issue of notice and or consent. The second thing is I think businesses who are in business because they're effective at communicating certain messages to consumers towards the ends that they want should be involved in the process towards the ends that we're looking at here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Surprise.
Thank you, George.
Mike?
Ms. Barrett, I understand your company, Axiom, has roughly 1,500 pieces of data on every American. So, I'm a male. I live in Pittsburgh. I'm 56 years old. That's 3 data points, 3 pieces of information about me. That means there's roughly 1,497 data points left. So, just between you and me, what else do you know about me?
Good question, and I appreciate your asking it. When we talk about 1,500 potential data points, what we're referring to is the different possibilities of information we might have about an individual. And to give you an example, we have over 600 different lifestyle and interest categories. No one has all 600 variables. I happen to like to bicycle and cook and read. So that's 3 out of 600 for me.
So that's all part of the 1,500?
So that's all part of the 1,500.
Okay.
So I would say an average person may have 20 or 30 or 40.
Let me ask you some more questions, and they're just simple yes or no answers. So could you send me a statement with everything you know about me?
We offer access to the data. We have 2 kinds of data. We have data that we use for marketing and data that we use for identity management and risk decisions. And the answer to your question is yes for the data in the risk decision category, and we will send you a summary of the data in the marketing category.
So could I log on to your website and see what others know about me and what you sell to other people about me?
No, we do not.
That's fine. I know's fine. Can I log onto your website, or can you send me a letter telling me who you sold my information to?
I'm sorry, who sold?
Who you sold my information to. Could you tell me who you sold my information to?
We do track all of the sales that we make.
But could you give me that information if I wanted to know who you sold my information to?
We do not provide that information to you.
Thank you. Can I choose to delete certain information that you have about me if something's old or out of date or doesn't apply to me anymore?
Yes.
And how would that process work? How would I go in there and do that?
You would contact us and ask if it's the marketing data. You would ask for the data to be deleted, and actually we will remove the entire record if you wish. On the risk side of the house, you can do it element by element and pick and choose the elements that you wish to have corrected.
Very good. So I can be completely removed from your database if I want, every trace about me gone, if I just call you and say, I want everything you have about me erased. I can do that?
You can do that for our marketing products. We do not allow you to erase or remove all the data from our risk products. Those are the ones, and identity management products. Those are the products that catch the bad guys, and we don't let the bad guys opt out of that data.
So tell me, I'm curious, where do you get all the information you have about me? Where does it all come from? Where do you get it from?
It comes from 3 primary sources. The first is public records and publicly available information. The second is surveys that consumers fill out and volunteer information about their interests.
Like warranty cards?
Warranty cards is just one small part. And the third category is information from companies that have a relationship with you and have given you notice and choice about the fact that your data may be shared with another party, a third party like Axiom.
So do you sell medical or other sensitive information that's attached to personally identifiable information? Do you sell that?
We do not sell what we call sensitive information in any of our marketing products. Medical data, unless it's self-reported by the consumer, we would have no personal health information as regulated by HIPAA in any of our marketing products.
What's the minimum information you need to identify someone? How many data points do you need to identify someone?
A name and address would be the baseline.
So with 2 data points, you can pretty much identify anyone?
Well, we can. It depends on what we're using that information for. If we're using it for marketing, that may be sufficient to say we don't want to market to this person, or we do. If we're actually using data for an identity application, we would need more data points to verify that you're who you really claim to be.
Tell me, do you audit the companies that buy the information from you? I mean, do you make sure they lock it up properly, that they use it for what they say they want to use it for?
For any company that buys any kind of sensitive data from us, we do both a on-site inspection and a audit of their practices to make sure that they're going to treat that information responsibly. For companies that buy non-sensitive information from us, we go through a credentialing process, which makes us comfortable that that company is a legitimate entity and that they will respect the terms of our contract and keep the information confidential.
Our committee's had several hearings about data security and online security. Have you had any security breaches?
We had an incident back in 2003 where one of our external servers was hacked, and we used it to transport information back and forth between our clients. But fortunately, we had a policy on that server that any sensitive information needed to be encrypted, and so no consumers were put at risk as a result of that incident.
How would you inform a consumer whose information had been compromised? What would your procedure be?
Well,
or do you do it?
Well, it would depend on whose data the information was. If it was Axiom's data, because we have both our own data products that we sell in the marketplace, and we also provide computer services for clients who are hosting and housing their data on our computers. If it was Axiom's data, we would be responsible for the notification. If it was client's data, we would work with that client to make sure the consumers were notified.
Thank you. Just one final question, and for Mr. Dixon and Ms. Dixon and Mr. Hofnagel. It's clear that vast amounts of personal information about individual consumers are collected, aggregated, analyzed, and sold for a variety of commercial purposes. In response, some people say, so what? If a person likes to ski but is mistakenly identified in the database as an angler and receives offers or coupons for fishing equipment, what's the harm? Ms. Barrett recommended in her written testimony that before we engage in additional regulation, we should articulate the extent of the harm. So I want to ask Ms. Dixon and Mr. Hofnagel, can you please answer that question? Where is the harm to the consumers? And also, I want to give you a chance to maybe just react to my line of questioning to Ms. Barrett and whether you have any thoughts on that. Do you think this is what Americans expect? And what kind of rules of the road do you think we should put in place? I know. And then I'm going to get to you, Cliff, and be mighty generous with your time. Go ahead.
Thank you for your question. A couple of thoughts. First, I want to talk about the harm, and then I'd like to respond to the line of questioning. Thank you for your question. The one thing that's quite clear is that the companies, when they discuss these issues, you'll hear companies talk about the benefits of having this information available. And there's no question that there are benefits. I don't think anyone's arguing about the benefits. We know there are benefits. The problem is that there are indeed also harms. So, for example, it's the shadow side of all of this. The same information, we saw it on badcustomers.com database. The same information that's used to target advertising is also used to deny transactions of consumers who have done disputed charges. So you have the same information being used for completely different purposes. Once the information is compiled, you really lose the ability to determine how that information will be used and in all contexts that it will be used, unless it's covered under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But what we've been talking about here today are all non-FCRA uses of the data and also all non-HIPAA uses of the data. So it's really outside of regulation. The second thing would be inaccuracies, outdated information, and again, incorrect inferences. I think that when you have these very clear pictures of consumers, you really do get locked into a bit of a pictorial box. Here's what consumer X or Y looks like. Here's how we're going to treat this consumer. We're all familiar with a situation where people were not allowed to vote because they landed in certain databases. Some of this information was incorrect. So we're talking about substantive rights that can be impacted here. So it's the picture of the consumer. Is this the right picture? If it's not, how do we correct that?
I'm so far over my time. I'm just going to ask Mr. Huff for a quick response, and then we'll get to the next witness.
I'll be quick. I would turn the harm question around and say, and ask retailers questions like, why are they trying to re-identify consumers without telling them about it? So I detailed in my testimony the example of one company that will ask for your zip code at the register. If you give your zip code, they will combine it with your name from a credit card swipe, and then they will go out and get your home address. Why not just ask the consumer, can we have your home address? The fact that so much of this data collection occurs in secrecy, I think, speaks to the harm issue.
Thank you very much. My time has long since expired, and I'm going to yield now to my good friend from Florida, Mr. Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just compliment you on your rapid-fire questions.